Alright, so we made it to New Orleans.
Yay!
We actually did some fun stuff last night. We ate at a restaurant called Compère Lapin. I'm probably butchering that. I think it's French for Brother Rabbit, which is...
Yeah, I didn't catch the story.
some kind of fairy tale or
our waitress was telling
folk
another
tale.
table. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think we should have asked her the story about
But
it.
it's actually Chef Nina Compton. She was on Top Chef New Orleans. Excellent restaurant. Highly recommend if you're ever in New Orleans. Kind of Caribbean-ish / New Orleans food. Hanging out in Jackson Square with my favorite lady friend / the missus. And probably embarrassing her as we walk down the sidewalk.
Trying to ignore it.
Even if you've never been to New Orleans, you've undoubtedly heard tales about the debauchery that occurs in the French Quarter and specifically on Bourbon Street. If that's what you're looking for, it's definitely there. But even if it's not what you're looking for, I still would recommend that you take a walk down Bourbon Street and take in the sights a little bit. But beyond the daiquiris to go, the strip clubs, and the casinos, there is a unique culture to New Orleans that is unlike any that I've ever seen anywhere in the United States. Time almost seems irrelevant for people who live in New Orleans. It's as if they are all moving at their own pace and nobody seems to care. Now, it might be easy to assume that this is based on laziness or apathy, but as you spend some time in New Orleans and you talk to the people that live there, you soon learn that there's wisdom into thinking this way, and perhaps it's the rest of us that are doing it wrong. So this trip was not a poker trip per se. In fact, it was a trip for me and my wife to get away from the kids for a few nights and enjoy the company of each other. But luckily for me, I have a really cool wife, and she totally understood when I said that I would like to get in at least a small poker session while we're there. So I hooked the wife up with a spa package and we headed over to Harrah's. So I looked ahead on the Bravo app and I saw that the biggest no limit hold'em game being spread at the moment was 1-3. We called, got on the list, and walked over to the casino.
1, 2, 3, jump!
We get there and shortly after we arrive, our seat is available. So the max buy-in here is up to the amount of the big stack at the table. I look around the table, there is one big stack, looks like maybe a little over 1,000. But I decided to go ahead and buy in for 500. That will cover the majority of the table, and I can always add on later if I want to. The first hand, we have Ace-6 suited in the small blind with 500 effective. The under the gun player raises to 12 and we call. Against a late position raiser, I would probably elect to 3-bet this hand, but considering that the original raiser is under the gun, we decide to just call. The flop is Ace-Queen 5 with 2 hearts and 1 spade. This is a pretty good flop for us. We flop top pair with a pretty suspect kicker, but we also have a backdoor spade draw. We're first to act, and we go ahead and check, and the under the gun player bets 20. We call. The turn is an ace of clubs, giving us the trip aces. Now we feel like we are almost definitely in the lead at this point. I check, hoping to get a check from the initial raiser, and he disappoints us and gives a check. The river is a 10 of clubs. The pot is 65, and I think we want to go ahead and put in a bet here, try to get some value. We'd like to get value from somebody that has a queen, or maybe somebody that has another high pocket pair, such as kings or jacks. So I decided to go for a little more than half the pot. We go for 40, and under the gun folds. He actually tosses his hand face up, 2 nines. Don't think that we could have gotten a call from this player, as I ended up playing quite a bit with this player after this. He seemed to be a fairly tight player, and I doubt he would have called for a smaller size. So a little bit of backstory before this next hand. There's a player a couple seats to our left who is an older gentleman, and we've been chatting quite a bit. He seemed like a pretty nice fellow. He heard me ordering a drink that they were going to charge me extra for, and he had them put on his platinum casino card, which would give it to me for free. I tipped the server extra, and everyone was happy. And then this hand happens. We have 6-7 of clubs in the small blind. The under the gun player, which is this gentleman, raises to 6. The person to his immediate left calls, we call, and the big blind calls. The flop is decent. It's a 6-9-2 flop with 1 club, giving us middle pair and a backdoor flush draw with some backdoor straight draws. We check. The big blind bets 15. The under the gun player calls, and we call. The turn is pretty sweet. It's a 6 of diamonds, giving us trip 6s. I go ahead and check here. I think that if there are some overpair holdings, they will probably continue to bet for protection against overcards. We check, big blind checks, and the under the gun player bets 50. It's almost a pot size bet, and this player only had 200 effective at the beginning of the hand, so he's now sitting with about 130 behind. I think check raising here is probably a no-brainer, so we go ahead and make it 200. The big blind folds, and the under the gun player calls off their last 130. The river's a jack, and we roll our hand over, and he throws his hand in the muck face up, aces. He clearly was not happy with the way this hand went down, and while I understand that having your aces cracked is never a good feeling, I think he was a tad out of line. He seemed to take exception with the way I played my hand, which I don't even feel like I should have to defend the way I played my hand, because any good live player knows that your bread and butter are the people that play their hands terribly. So there's really no good that can come from berating them at the table. But in this instance, either way, I think I played my hand just fine. He opened up for $6 under the gun. That's not going to narrow the field very much. I think that if you're not wanting to get your aces cracked, you might want to raise a little bit larger. So shortly after the hand, he made a seat change to the other end of the table. And I kind of get the vibe that he's gunning for me. And I also feel like we're probably not going to get any more free drinks. A little bit later, we get involved in a hand with pocket nines, 500 effective. We raise to 12 from middle position, and hijack calls. So far, this game does not appear to be super splashy, but in all fairness, this was 2 or 3 p.m. on a Saturday, so it's possible that the splashy crowd doesn't arrive till later. The flop makes me want to take my clothes off and acquire Mardi Gras beads. It's King 9-8 with 2 clubs. We flop middle set. We bet 20, and the hijack calls. The turn is an ace of diamonds. We are definitely going to continue betting. We decide on a bet a little bigger than half pot, 35, and the hijack calls. The river is a 3 of diamonds. It does bring in the backdoor flush, but there are only a couple hands that I think would be in his range that would hit. So, fairly confident that we still have the best hand. We bet 100. We get some good news or some bad news, depending on what you think. But my opponent says, no, I'm not gonna call 100. I'm gonna raise. And he puts in 400. So my first thought is that we're probably still good here. There's still a decent amount of hands that I think he can have that we beat. Hands such as 8-9, ace-9, ace-8. Additionally, he can't have ace-9 of diamonds because the ace of diamonds came on the turn. So it kind of limits the amount of flushes he could have. Flushes he could have though, maybe Jack-10 of diamonds, 6-7 of diamonds, and also some suited Broadway hands like King-Queen diamonds, King-Jack of diamonds, King-10 of diamonds. We only have to be right 1 in 3 times, So I go ahead and make the call, and he shows us the bad news. He has king, queen of diamonds for the coca nuts. Now, a little word about this player. I ended up talking with this player quite a bit. He appeared to me to be the most competent player at the table, and that's good news and bad news. The good news is I at least have a good idea of how he's playing probably, but the bad news is he's probably a lot better than the majority of the players, so he's still gonna put us to some really tough decisions. We're not gonna be able to exploit his play as much as some of the other players who are making some very obvious mistakes.
Consider this a little bit of foreshadowing for the future.
So in this next hand, we have straddled 6 from the button, and we have ace-jack offsuit. Middle position is our friend from earlier who used to be our buddy, but not so much anymore. He puts in a raise to 23. There's one caller in between us, and then we call. The flop is jack 6-7 rainbow. Top pair, top kicker. Doesn't get too much better than that on this board. Middle position shoves in the rest of his stack, which is $80. He's been short stacking ever since we busted him for 200 when he had the aces. The other player folds, and we quickly call. Turn is a jack, which I'm not even sure we needed, and the river is a 7. We flip our hand face up, trip jacks, and he, with a disgusted look on his face, mucks face down. It's possible that the turn gave us the best hand, but my instincts tell me that if we had bad beat this player, he would have showed the cards. So then we get king 8 of diamonds in the cutoff. This is one of those hands that I would probably throw away a lot in a low stakes game, but in this game in particular, people were playing pretty snug and it folded all the way to me in the cutoff. So I go ahead and put in a raise to 15 and the button calls. The flop is 8 deuce deuce with 2 spades. Flops have been pretty good to us. We flop top pair with the second best kicker. I go ahead and put in a c-bet of 15 and we get re-raised to 50. So he does have some value here. He could be re-raising us with an overpair such as 9s or 10s, or he could be re-raising us with a 2. But I also think he has a lot of suited Broadway that would also be played like this. So we go ahead and make the call, and the turn is a 4 clubs. We check and button bets 50. If he's semi-bluffing here with a spade draw and some overs, this card did not help him. So I think that we are okay to make a call here and see what happens on the river. The river is a jack of diamonds. We check again, hoping that we can just get to a cheap showdown. But the button decides to bet 100. The jack is not particularly great for us. It's now a little bit less likely that he's barreling off with spades and a couple of overs. I think we can probably make an argument for calling here. We do have second pair and the obvious draw bricked, but I go ahead and give it up. I was feeling like this player in particular is probably under bluffing in some of these spots. So this next hand's pretty interesting. I get a call from the wife. She lets me know she's back at the hotel and she's gonna be getting ready to meet me for dinner. So I think it's a good time to wrap the session up. We decide to play one more orbit and we get to the under the gun position. I'm about to get up. I'm just not even gonna play my under the gun. I figure I'll just leave with one free hand left to play. And then I realize when I look at my chips, I have exactly $6. Now, this isn't a great way to make your decisions in life or in poker, but I decide, you know what, I'll go ahead and toss the undergun straddle on, and most likely I'll end up folding because I'll probably get dealt trash, and then that $6 will be gone and I'll have a nice even stack. Never mind that I could have just used that to tip the dealer, tip the cashier, which are all things that I tend to do whenever I get up from a poker game. So I put out the $6 straddle with the ace-5 of diamonds. Middle position raises to 35. So this player is the one that we had talked about earlier. He's the one that I said was probably the most solid player at the table. By this point, we'd been chatting with him quite a bit, exchanging a few glances here and there as our table mates made some fairly interesting plays. Told me his name's Kyle, that he lives in Louisiana. So what's up, Kyle? It was nice playing with you, and hopefully I'll run into you again sometime. It folds all the way around to me in the straddle. And being me, I cannot waste an opportunity to play another big hand. So I make the call. In hindsight, I think I would have liked to have 3-bet this player, would have taken the initiative away, and also we do block some of his better hands. So the flop is Jack 5-7 with 2 hearts. We check and he bets 60. Could probably let this one go, but we did hit a pair, and there's a decent chance that he's just c-betting this flop and that he'll shut down on the turn. So we go ahead and make the call to 60. The turn is a 3 of hearts, so a flush is now possible. I go ahead and check, and he fires 80, which is a little bit less than half pot. So I start thinking about whether we should just fold here or whether we could try to put in a bluff. Folding is certainly not a terrible option at this point. We did not pick up any equity on the turn, and it's very likely that we would need to improve if we were going to take it down on the river. So that leaves only 2 options, fold or raise. Which one do you think I took? Of course, the bluff. I mean, come on, what's more fun? Folding and going home, or putting in a big bluff against the guy at the table who we have the most respect for? Normally when I am trying to select a hand to bluff with, I'm gonna be looking for things like blocking and unblocking hands. And in this particular example, we don't really have a hand that does that. The only thing that we're really blocking is a set of 5s and maybe some combos of ace-jack. But we actually don't want to block combos of ace-jack because combos of ace-jack are hands that he might lay down to some pressure. We decide that we're going to bluff. And when you decide to bluff, you need to actually bluff. So that's what we do. We decide we are going to check raise this turn, and then pretty much no matter what comes on the river, unless it's another heart, we're gonna blast off into that river. So that's what we do. We make it 300. While selecting good hands to bluff with is a key part of a winning player's strategy, I would actually say that if you were going to be good at one thing when it comes to bluffing, it is in the way that you execute your bluffs. Too many players will try to make a bluff and then give up when it doesn't work. That's not how you run a bluff. So he calls the 300 and we're going to the river. The river is a 5 of clubs. We got trips. What? Are you serious? Oh, this is one of those moments where I already knew the plan and I'm still gonna execute the plan, obviously. But now I feel a little bit bad because I think I might have just rivered this guy. So we open shove our last 300, which is a little bit less than half pot. Ideally, I could have maybe sized down my raise on the turn so that I had a bigger shove on the river, but I don't really hate it. I still think that the amount that I had left was enough that he could still fold a lot of his range. But he doesn't fold. He calls. I sort of semi-embarrassingly flip up my hand and say I rivered trips. And he shakes his head and says it's good. He had the ace-jack with the jack of hearts. So there you have it. It was supposed to be the last hand of the evening. And we rake in a massive $1,400 pot. That 5 ended up being a pretty crucial card in our session. We were in for 1,000 at that point, and we had 700 effective. So we were actually down 300 bucks when we thought we were cashing out, and now we are up 400 bucks. So I want to take this moment to talk about something that relates to this hand. I was really impressed with his outlook on poker in general. You know, I was very apologetic. You know, he'd kind of been like the person at the table I was most friendly with, even though, you know, we're all there to play poker and it's fine. You stack somebody, you stack somebody. That's what we're there for, right? But at the same time, Yeah, I hit a 2-outer. I mean, that just feels a little bit dirty when you're bluffing and you hit a 2-outer. But did that bother my man Kyle? Nope, not at all. He was pretty happy. He said, I'm just glad to know that I made all the right decisions. Wow, that's always refreshing to hear at a poker table, because that's exactly how you should be looking at poker. Poker is not your results. Poker is a collection of decisions that you can analyze individually and decide whether or not you made the right decisions. It has nothing to do with whether you win or lose. And the fact that my friend Kyle knows this means that he is way ahead of most of his fellow poker mates. It's really easy in poker and in life to become results oriented when it comes to the way we perceive things. And this is one of the ways that we sabotage ourselves on a daily basis when we see things happening and we don't actually view them as independent events, and we instead looked at the collective results. And it's one of the first things that every good poker player needs to learn. I feel like poker gets a bad rap in a lot of ways. Some people complain that it's a negative kind of game because you're there to take money from other people, and therefore it does not produce anything of tangible good benefit to the world in general. But I think that's a load of garbage, because things like understanding probability and statistics can actually help you in many facets of your life, not just at the poker table. And it's a bunch of common misconceptions that tons of people carry around with them on a daily basis. And we're not even just talking about stupid people. We're talking about some of the brightest people in the world are terrible when it comes to analyzing the future and predicting outcomes based off the past. So even though we were about to leave, I'm not the kind of player that likes to hit and run. So I decided I'm gonna stay for at least another couple orbits. So we wrap up the session. We did have to rebuy at one point, so we're in for 1,000, and we cash out for 1,300 for a profit of $300. So the rest of the trip went about as you can imagine. We had a little bit too much to eat, maybe a little bit too much to drink, but we had an amazing time. We stopped into a couple of old favorites that we've been to before, and we also tried out some new place. We got some killer breakfasts at the Ruby Slipper, which I think there used to just be one location, but now there's a ton. That's a pretty good spot if you want to go and have some pretty awesome breakfast. Also would recommend District Donuts. This place is out of control. There is one in Vegas now, I've heard, so they have spread out. I don't know if they're anywhere else other than New Orleans and Vegas, but they're definitely in Vegas. So if it's anything like the one in New Orleans, which the one we go to is on Magazine Street in the Garden District, please go there and try these donuts. They are so freaking good, man. We had a king cake donut, which a king cake is something that they make for Mardi Gras. It's a round cake, it has different colors on it, and they stuff a plastic baby in it, and then you try not to choke to death. We also stopped in at a bar called Tonique, and if you're a fan of our favorable vlogger, Andrew Nemi, you may remember that he also dropped into this place on his trip. It's a really cool place to have a ton of awesome cocktails. It's the kind of place that makes, you know, these upscale craft cocktails, but they're not so pretentious that they refer to themselves as mixologists. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I'm just saying it's kind of a divey, more local feel, yet with some very high-end cocktails. So if that's your type of thing, I would 100% check that out. So that's gonna pretty much do it for today. I've got some really cool stuff coming up. In 5 days, I'll be headed to Las Vegas. And this time, I'm going to be playing a ton of poker the whole time. I'll be there for 4 nights, and I'll be staying at the Harrah, so we'll be bouncing around, probably playing 2-5 or 5-10, and you know, checking out some other stuff. So I'm really looking forward to that. This will be my first time vlogging in Vegas, and it should be fun. As always, I would really love it if you like, subscribe, click the notification bell, do all the things if you want to see more of this content. If you feel like commenting, please drop a comment below. I read every single comment, and I pretty much respond to all of them unless you're just a complete jerk. And even then, I might still respond, just depending on the mood I'm in. So thank you, and I hope that next time we're talking about the piles of cash that we brought home from Las Vegas. So babe, what did you think of the trip to New Orleans?
Oh, it was really nice. I thought that we had a really good time, and I'm so happy that you won at the poker game, because if you hadn't, that would have been pretty disappointing.
Yeah, I agree. That would have been pretty bad. You know, it's a shame that we sucked out on our new friend, but I think we've learned to deal with it. Your glasses are a little bit. This is getting a little weird. There's a big window right here, and the street is about 10 feet away, so people keep walking by, and I'm holding a paper mache woman, so I'm gonna stop. Not sure that this is even funny.